Can you solve this riddle? What has an eye but cannot see?
I know, Rosalind.
On this episode of Weatherwise, we are learning what makes up, can you guess it? A hurricane.
Welcome back to Weatherwise, folks. I'm your host, meteorologist Dylan Hudler. Today we're going to talk about just a fascinating meteorological phenomenon, hurricanes. It's such a fascinating process, something that I can break down and show you kind of the anatomy behind a hurricane. So that's what we're going to do today. You know, in these late summertime months, really getting into August, September, and October. That's when hurricane season starts to get a little bit more active. Based on climatology from the past 50 years or so, we know that beginning in August, things start to get more active leading up into September. Right around September 10th, that's when things start to peak for hurricane season and then gradually declining in activity after that. The blue is the number of named storms, the frequency of named storms we see, in the orange is the amount of hurricanes. Today we're going to be talking about hurricanes. They're most common during August and September. So here's kind of an aerial view of a hurricane split like a pie with a chunk taken out of it. You can see the different parts. Obviously, you've seen a hurricane from satellite. You know basically what they look like from overhead, but inside, there's a lot of really neat processes going on. So obviously, here on the outside, that's the outside of the hurricane. In this middle part, this clear kind of cylinder throughout, that's the eye of the hurricane. You can kind of think of it from a top-down approach as like a donut. It looks like a donut. And a hurricane is basically just a bunch of showers and storms that have organized and come together and over the warm ocean waters been able to spin, and it's developed a small area of low pressure. Inside of those thunderstorms, obviously, you know, just like we see here in Mississippi and Alabama, there's a lot of rising motion. So from the sea surface up into the clouds, we have a lot of rising air within the thunderstorms that make up that hurricane. As that air rises, it can only go so high. Once it reaches that maximum level, it starts to spin and disperse outward. And so that's why we have that counterclockwise, or clockwise, spinning of the hurricane. The circulation, the flow spreads inward toward that eye of the hurricane once it gets high enough. And then once it gets to a certain height, it obviously starts to disperse outward as well. And so what results from that is the flow around it. Then in the middle, an area of more stable air, and the air begins to sink, and that's what clears those clouds out there in the middle of the hurricane, making for the eye. So just a really neat, cool anatomy of a hurricane. And if I was to turn it on its side, this is what it would look like. These are the individual bands of the hurricane. Obviously here in the middle, this is the eye where things are most common. Lots of big storms out through here extending all the way to the outer edge. So you can kind of think of a hurricane as an onion, or sort of like a cake if you were to stack it horizontally instead of vertically like you normally do. So that's something really neat to see there with the inside of a hurricane. That's all I have for you this week. Hurricane season beginning to get more active. We'll keep an eye on the tropics. If you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to submit a topic for a future Weatherwise episode, you can send us an email at weather@wcbi.com or reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter. And until then, y'all take care, stay cool, and I'll see you in the next one.
Weatherwise is brought to you by Fort County Electric Power Association.